Hello and welcome back to the pre-TI team preview and review, where I go over every single attendee for this year's international and I go over their past year of DPC play, specifically 2021. I'm not talking about all the way back to August, but just this year, and also going over some stats of those DPC games that they've played, and sort of giving a small little preview. Nothing concrete or anything, just a little preview of how I'm expecting the team to do and how well I'm anticipating or how much I'm anticipating a team to play. And we are now up to our last team that made it in through the regional qualifiers, which is obviously Team Spirit. And I gotta say, this is one of my new favorite up and coming teams, specifically just because of how young and fantastic the roster is proving itself to be. And I think a lot of this team's glory comes from their mid laner, Toronto Tokyo, who's really been proving himself this year. But he also, at the same time, is really overshadowing a lot of the rest of his team, who has been absolutely fantastic as well. I'm talking about Collapse, their offlaner, being absolutely fantastic this year. And same thing for their 4 position. And then they have their veteran 5 position, Miposhka, who is the only one that's actually played in an international to this point and has been playing in the competitive scene for more than just a year and a half or 2 years now. But yes, we'll get more into that later as we go on. But jumping into their team stats now, finishing with a total of 585 points total. These guys suffered some deductions because of some player difficulty through the near the start of the season or near the start of the year. But at the end of the day, it wasn't what was holding them back from making it through DPC points. They were still quite a ways away from making it from that. They were over 200 points away, so it was a little unrealistic that they were going to make it based off points unless they did really, really well in that last major that they went to. So they finished with 585 points total after suffering 15% for deduction after season 1. Internationally, they placed 14th place, so just barely missing the cut, but again, there was still a pretty wide point gap between them and 12th place. And then regionally, they finished 2nd place. So only one team, just like with our SEA region that we covered yesterday, only one team that had actually made it into the top 12 from the Eastern Europe region. And I think it's really good that that's how it ended up playing out, because I think that if we ended up having 3 teams coming in from the Eastern Europe region, it would have been a pretty weak team in my opinion, because this region wasn't really the most competitive, and I don't think I'm being groundbreaking at all by saying that. I think it's pretty common knowledge, especially with Virtus Pro saying that they were intentionally trying to give themselves more difficulties during the drafting stage so that they would have to overcome those difficulties just in their DPC seasons. So they're trying to make it more difficult on themselves because the region was so easy, and yet Virtus Pro didn't drop a single series in either season. So I think it's pretty good that it's only 2 teams coming from these regions. However, these 2 teams are not weak teams by any means. Team Spirit is a team that has shown that they have improved immensely throughout this year. Starting off in season 1, they finished 4th place. They had actually tied for 3rd place, meaning that if they had won their tiebreaker, they would have been going to that first major, but they lose it. And so they end up going 4-3, and they get themselves 100 DPC points, which they would lose 15% of with their player changes. So yes, they missed out on the first major, and that is the Singapore major. Jumping into season 2, though, they make huge strides, and they jump to 2nd place, only dropping 1 series, and that was against Virtus Pro. And that was a series they probably should have won too. They had that game 3 in the bag, but I think they just got a little overzealous, just a little bit lack of experience and patience there, and they ended up losing that series against Virtus Pro. But it was a very close one, and I was really hoping these guys would pull through. But regardless, they earned themselves 300 DPC points and a ticket to the We Play and a major. They got a chance to play through the, not the wildcard stage, the group stage. So they got to play against some really competitive teams. And let me tell you, these guys were very competitive with those teams. We'll get into that. And so in that major, they ended up finishing actually 7th and 8th. They won one of their series and lost one. They started in the lower brackets. So they started off by knocking out Alliance, and then they lost to Vici Gaming. So because they finished in 7th and 8th, they earned themselves 200 more points. Sadly, it was not enough for them to make it based off points. So looking at their win-loss now against other teams attending this international, like I said, they had played a lot of teams because they were in that group stage that are actually attending this year, and they did pretty damn well for a super young team against a lot of these bigger known teams that are really highly anticipated to go far in this tournament. So starting off with their first 2 seasons where they played against just Virtus Pro as another team that's just going to international because they missed out on that first major. They lost to Virtus Pro 2-1 back in February 14th, and then roughly 3 months later they lost again to Virtus Pro in season 2. That was on May 13th. But then fast forward to this major almost a month later. This is where they take games off of some of the big name teams I was talking about. In the best of 2s, they ended up drawing against Evil Geniuses, Vici Gaming, PSG LGD, and Beast Coast. And it's funny, the teams that they lost to, the only two teams that they had lost to in that group stage, were teams that aren't even going to this year's international. That was Team Liquid and Team Nigma. So I thought that was kind of funny because taking a game off of Evil Geniuses, VG Gaming, and PSG LGD is no joke. These guys were showing that they're very competitive. And with that showing, they were actually able to make it into that lower bracket, like I said, where they knocked out Alliance 2-1. And then the next day, they played against VG Gaming in the lower bracket, and VG Gaming was able to take control of them and knocked them out in 2 games. Looking now at some stats, of course, I'm going to be covering these games that I have listed here, which is all the games against other teams attending TI10, as well as all the games from their regional qualifiers. In total, there's 31 games tracked, and because this is the most games tracked I've had for any team that I've covered so far, so their stats should probably be the most accurate, as opposed to some of the teams that I've had really smaller samples. Some teams have only had about 12 games that I've covered, so the sample sizes were pretty small, but these guys have the largest I've covered, so a lot of these stats should be quite accurate. And a lot of these stats are against teams that have been really solid, like I said, a lot of them coming from these other teams that are attending TI and are looking like some of the favorites for this year's TI. Starting off with Radiant, they're barely positive, going 10-9. Dire, they're 8-4, so they much preferred Dire, it seemed. First pick, also it was kind of not very decisive. It was pretty even, 9-8. And then on last picks, they were 9-5. So it seems like they really prefer playing Dire and last pick, but they never really played them at the same time. They only played Dire last pick once, but they did win that game, and that was actually the last game of the best of 5 series of the regional qualifiers. That was the only game they played Dire second pick. But yes, the real difference here for Radiant. So the Radiant win rate was pretty close to 50%, slightly above, but the real difference here was on Radiant first pick, they were 2-4, and on Radiant last pick, they were 8-5, so they were significantly better when they had second pick on Radiant. And then on Dire first pick, they were 64%, 7-4, and like I said, on Dire second pick, they were 1-0. But yes, looking at their game win rates now, in game 1s and 2s, they were an even 50%, and in deciding game 3s, they were actually only 2-3. Notably, they had lost their game 3 in that grand finals and gone down 2-1, but they did win their game 4 and 5 to knock out Team Empire in their regional qualifiers. So yes, like I said, 31 total games tracked. They went a total of 18-13 across those 31 games, so slightly positive. In those games, they played a total of 55 different heroes, their most played being Mars with 10, Marana with 8 games, Tiny and Phoenix with both 7 games, Hoodwink with 6, and then Winter Wyvern with 5 games. So they had quite a bit of diversity. There were no absurdly high amount of heroes played. Their best heroes being Marana going 6-2, Winter Wyvern going 4-1, and then Lena, DK, and Dark Willow all being 4-0 respectively. Their worst heroes, however, were Mars. I wouldn't say Mars was a terrible hero for them, but they did lose the most with it, with 6 total losses, 4 wins on 10 games. Templar Assassin going 2-3. It wasn't a terrible win rate, but it was one of the strongest heroes of the patch, and they just really couldn't consistently win, even in the qualifiers, against some of the weaker teams. And then Medusa 0-2, another one of those heroes that was very popular, very strong throughout this past few months, and they just couldn't find success with it. Looking at the heroes most banned by Team Spirit now, across those 31 games, they had banned a total of 60 heroes. Their most notably banned Timbersaw, which was first phase banned very often. More than half of the games they had first phase banned this Timbersaw, adding him up to a total of 17 bans. Broodmother with 11 bans total, and then Doom with 9 bans. That Broodmother as well was only being banned by them throughout their regional qualifiers. So that hero had, I think, 1 ban going into that qualifier and ended up being their second most banned hero across the games that I've counted. It's just kind of the nature of the patch, it seems. And then most banned against them, they had Ancient Apparition banned against them 20 times. Yeah, this was a it was a patch, all right. Not a lot of variation in the bans across all these teams. It seems like teams were pretty specific. It seems like teams were either having Broodmother and AA and DK most banned against them. Viper was another popular one, which is most banned against them. Or they were banning those heroes themselves. It was either you had a Brood player on your team or you didn't. That's kind of just how the patch was. So Viper, like I said, 13 bans, as well as Puck with 13 bans. Puck being probably the most spread out bans. They were having Puck banned against them all the way back from Season 1. So not really surprised to see that there. Looking now at their roster, I actually put their coach on here now. This is the first team that I'm including their coach in the roster. And starting off with Silent, and this is his first time going into an international as a coach. He has only coached 1 tournament before, and that was actually the We Play Animator, where he coached Team Spirit. So this is the first time he's going in as a coach. But as a player, the best he's ever performed at an international was at TI5 and TI8, where he finished 9th to 12th place. At TI5, he played with Empire, and at TI8, he played with Windstrike. Looking now at their position 1 player, Yatoro, and the next 4 players on this team, the 1 through the 4 position, all the best that they've ever done at international was making it through these qualifiers. They have not actually played. A lot of these guys, like I said at the start of the video, their competitive experience in Dota goes only back to about 1.5 years and 2 years. Like, these guys only started playing really when the pandemic started. So a lot of these guys are really fresh players, and that's why I think this team is one of the most fun teams to watch, because they're all so young, but they've got this veteran coach behind them who's really bringing the team together. And I think from the start of the year, when they went 4th place in the first season of the DBC, all the way to now where they finished 2nd place in the region, they were taking games off some of the best teams in the tournament. And that's on LAN too. And then now they're going into this regional qualifiers, they're winning the whole thing, and they're going to this year's TI. So yeah, like I said, Toronto, Tokyo, Collapse, Miroslav, the best they've all done in an international tournament as well, has been finishing 1st place in these qualifiers. And then finally we have Miposhka, who the best he's ever done, was finished 7th and 8th place at TI7 with Team Empire. So finally wrapping things up in their best of 3 series, they have a total record of 2-2, 2-1. Their average GPM was pretty okay, nothing really remarkable, 22.98. Their average XPM as well was not really anything to be in awe of, which was 26.95. Average KDA as well, it was nothing really spectacular. So all their stats kind of being a little lower than you might think, but a lot of their games that I've calculated, over half of them actually are against some of these top teams that people are anticipating go really far this year's international, so you can't really blame them. Average KDA of 3.72 and an average match duration of 40 minutes and 10 seconds. I gotta say, these are like I've been saying, this is one of the most fun teams I've had watching this year. I gotta say, Toronto Tokyo is one of my favorite players to watch too. He plays a lot of the heroes that I really enjoy playing. He's a mid laner just like me, and it's really been fun seeing how far he's come throughout this year. But it's also cool because he's really overshadowing a lot of the other talent that's on his team. A lot of people look at this team and they just see Toronto Tokyo as this new up-and-coming mid player. However, a lot of their players, like I was saying, like their off-laner, their 4 position, their 5 position, are all super talented. Their 1 position as well, who I don't think has really had the chance to really shine yet. I'm really hoping he does do that this year at International. Not to say that he hasn't been playing well, but he's just been really overcast by the rest of his team. So yeah, I'm really hoping these guys do really well at this year's international. I hope these guys get a lot of really good experience. Maybe not winning this year, but I hope that they win at some point soon. They've got a hell of a fun roster to watch, and I'm super excited to watch these guys play. So yeah, let me know how you guys think they're going to do at this year's international in the comments down below. How do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to do really well? Do you think they're going to flop out of the group stage? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And do you think they're going to be able to take some series off of these top teams? I mean, we've seen that they were able to take games off of Evil Geniuses, PSG, LGD, those high-tier teams. Do you think they have what it takes to make it far in this tournament? Let me know. And yeah, be sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I'm going to be having a video where I'm going to be covering the first team to actually make it through points, and that's going to be South America Zone's Thunder Predator, as well as doing Beast Coast the next day after that. I'm going to be trying to upload every single day from here until the end of the international. So I'm going to be quite busy. If you don't want to miss any of that, please subscribe and share the video if you enjoyed it. And anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.